In this section, we are going to talk about the function and object-oriented programming. But first of all, I want to talk about the least comprehension, which is a topic between for loop and function. I define a list. I call it again my list. For example, 11. It is equal to 10, 12, 14, 16, and 18 and 20. This is my list, and I define power 2 list, and it is an empty list. Now I say for item in this one, my list 11, I wanna do this loop, and I wanna power 2 list dot append. I want to append this value to my power 2 list and fill it in each iteration. And I want it to be item powered by 2, very easy. And if I press shift and enter and call this power 2 list, now this power 2 it has these values. First, at the beginning, it is empty, there is nothing in it. But then for each iteration of this for loop, it multiply the item of the my list 11 and add it to this power 2 list. So first it would be 100, then 12 multiplied by 2, powered by 2 would be 144, 196, and until 200, which is 20 powered by 2 or 20 multiplied by 20. This is how these for loops work. But we can do it in another way. Instead of using this for loop here, we can define a list like that. And here I can say item powered by 2 for item in this my list 11. And if I press shift and enter, it will return as, sorry, this one should be power. And if I press shift and enter, it will return as exactly what we had here, and it is completely the same. What we have done, it's actually, instead of writing it writing this for like that, we just said, okay, return as item multiplied by 2, where the item is in this list, and put everything in one list. This is exactly the same like what we had here. It may be a little different, but as I mentioned before, while you're working with these for loops and its variety of performances, then you will get used to how to use it. This is a simple version of this for loop that we have here. But now we want to define function and apply this for loop that we have here in the function. So how we define function? If you remember in C++, we first define the data type that this function returns, and then we give it a name, for example, power 2, and then here we define the types of inputs. Like here, normally it is double or anything else, but here in Python we don't define the data type of the inputs or outputs. We can define them too, but normally we don't do it. To define a function, we use def to define the function, and then the name of the function, which here it is power 2. And here we just define a number. This is our input. We don't define the data type of this input. It's just a number. When the user enter a float number, this number will automatically be float. When they enter integer value, this number will automatically gain the data type of integer. And then column, and then here we just can say return, or just we can say return number, this number powered by 2. And if I call this power, just say write power and press tab, I can have access to power 2 function. Here it says that it is function. It is not an instance, it's a function. So if I choose the function and enter a number in it, for example 5, it should return as 25. If I press shift and enter, it will return as 25. We can define another function like just hello world, function. It doesn't have any input, and it just print as just simple hello world. If I shift and enter and call this one with two parentheses, then it will print us this hello world. It's very simple, but we can do lots of things with this function. We can define and this function actually we call them method when it is about object-oriented programming, and it is the basics of object-oriented programming. We should learn this function very well, and we usually use functions in our code to simplify the tasks that we are going to use them in different projects. Now we define another function named power to list creator, and the first value that it takes, the first input is actually power. We can just here change this one power list creator, and here we can say power value. This is our input, and we can say it is should be integer, and the initial value is 2. And then we have another input. It is the input list, and it is a list of integer, and its initial value is 1, 2, 3. We can delete this part and this part, both of them, and we just can define the data type of this power value. For example, what the user enters. If the user enter a float value, then the data type of this power value will automatically be float, and we don't need to assign any initial value to that. But I just want you to see another form of using it. So this is our function. I just pass it, and I want to test it. It seems that it's okay. And now we want to define a list, and we say item power by this power value for item in this input list here. This is exactly what we had here, but we are using a function for that, so we don't have to change the inputs and the item of the list every time. And we call it final list, and we can return this final list, or we can directly return this list that we created here. But I just want you to know what we are doing, so I do it like that. I press shift and enter, and now this function is available and it is ready to run. If I just call it without putting any input, it will power all of these items by 2 and return it, because it just do the calculation for the initial value of each of these inputs. So then it will return as 1 for 9, but I can change it, and I can say, okay, power value I want it to be equal to 3, and input list I want it to be equal to, for example, 10, 20, 30, 40. And if I press shift and enter, this is the result: 1,000, 8,000, 27,000, and 64,000. This is the results of this function. Okay, and the last two things that I'm going to talk about are map and lambda. What is map? If I just write map and with two parentheses and put the cursor inside the parentheses and press shift and tab, this is the docstring. Actually, I should tell you what is docstring too. How we can define a docstring is we just define this 6 signs like that. In between them here, if we write anything, then the user, when is using this function, can see what does this function do. For example, I can say this function is a simple hello world function. And for example, for this function, we can write down that this function just powered up the input by 2. But for example, here, if I just try to run this code and go and put the cursor inside this function, I press Shift Tab, then I can see the docstring, but I have not run it. I run it again, and here Shift and Tab. The docstring says this function is a simple hello world function. So having said that, going back to map, if I press Shift and Tab here, we can see that it has two inputs. First input is a function, and second input is an iterables. It is something that a for loop can run on it. For example, a list. If I define this function, power2 function, as a first input here, like that, and then the second input, I want to be a simple list 2, 3, 4. If I press Shift and Enter, let's delete this parenthesis. If I press Shift and Enter, we can see that it return a map with this address, but we can say change it to a list, so we can read it better. I want it to be list and two parentheses like that. If I press Shift and Enter, it run this power2 function for each element of this list that we have here. But I want to say that instead of using this power2, because this function is very simple, this function can be rewrite like that by using lambda. We can say lambda, and then we define the input. For example, the input will be a number, and then column. Then we can define what we want to do with this number, and we want to return it. We can say here just number powered by 2. This is exactly the same with what we have here. First, we say lambda, and then we define the input, and then we define what we want to return. Both of them are exactly the same. To prove it, I just copy it, and here, instead of using power2 function, I just insert this lambda expression here, and if I press if I press Shift and Enter, so I press it here. If I press Shift and Enter, it will return as exactly the same what we have here. So this is how the lambda work. We write lambda, and then the input name, and then what we want to return after a column. Input, column, what we want to return. This is it would be very practical, because many times that instead of just writing down some function for simple tasks, we use lambda in Python. You get used to that too after using these expressions more and more in Python.